Thank you all for being here. We're going to do a quick self-introduction, your name and your company and your role.
Okay, hi, I'm Melina Palmer and I'm the CEO of The Brainy Business.
Hi, I'm Hannah Cook and I work at Blue Yonder as a Senior Innovation Exec.
Josipa Majic, CEO of Tacit.
Excellent. And do we have one more person joining? No. Okay. Great.
This is my extra chair.
That's kind of nice. So I've got a few thoughts and questions here, but I do want to start out with what the Grit Future List is. And it's an evaluation of up-and-coming people in the industry, and there's an evaluation on a lot of different criteria that we go through from the judges' perspective. And we had about 150 nominations this year, and it was down to 20. We recognized some in Austin a month or 2 months ago, whenever Austin was. And now we get an opportunity to recognize some more. So this is really, I think it's fantastic, and I'm glad you guys are here. And you've crossed a pretty high hurdle with a lot of competition. So what does it mean to you personally to have, to be recognized in this, the future of research?
It's exciting. It's, kind of verifies all the work we've been doing, and it motivates you to want to do even more.
So, and you're coming at this from a CEO perspective, and so have you put it on your signature, or?
Yeah, I made sure to feature it on LinkedIn and to be letting people know. It's definitely something that was unexpected and very much appreciated to have been recognized in that way, and from a space that I think is just so important for all companies moving forward. And I'm an applied behavioral economist by training, and so bringing that behavioral science into the insight space is something that I think is really important moving forward. So.
And we'll get to it a little bit more later. And what about you? How has it impacted you?
Absolutely, same thing. So first of all, to be nominated is also a good thing, but then also to get selected, that's an even more exciting thing, I would say. I've been in this space for quite some time now, so it feels that my impression is that the field has evolved incredibly, and there's much more both activity and competition. So to be recognized among the selected group it's actually a very exciting thing.
So you said you've been in the field quite some time. Give me an idea of how long you've been in the field.
So I think my first big kind of biometric behavioral study for a Fortune 100 brand was, I think, 7 years ago or 8 years ago. So it feels like when I go back to what was the research design then, what were the trends then, kind of having agile research always on, it was crazy back then. It was literally crazy. So it feels like the field developed incredibly, and now insights are something that are mainstream, even among startups, among younger companies. It's not only reserved for these big conglomerates that have the budgets, that have people. It's now recognized as something every company needs, because if you don't have good insights, you don't have good products. If you don't have a good product, then you don't have a business.
So our definitions of been in the industry for a while are very different.
I was just speaking from kind of personal experience. It just feels subjectively, not objectively, as if in the couple of years, like everything changed.
So you guys are doing things a little bit differently. So what do you think it is that sets you apart, that is able to kind of differentiate you from some very good competition? Are there traits, the attribute of success? And anyone just jump in there. I'm looking at you.
I think I've always been a very determined person. I've kind of got that attitude to, I spoke about in my talk, although you've done something and it's gone well, what can be better, what can be better, what can be better? So that kind of relentless attitude of always improving, always learning, I think that's something that I'm really passionate about. Sometimes you might get onto it, but in my earlier stage of my career, it was really difficult to say no. But that kind of attitude is also kind of what's helped me progress as well, just that willingness to learn and keep going and keep improving.
So always saying yes?
Well, that can be a challenge sometimes, but yeah, it's
Okay.
good to have that mindset to always be open and learn and develop.
What about a capacity for risk? Especially, coming at this and kind of the directions that you guys are.
Yeah, I think that for me, I have a smaller company, and so I'm able to have some different types of risk, perhaps, than you might have at a more established agency or something along those lines. But I think for me, what has always set me apart is the just passion and the curiosity, right? And really wanting to understand the why and to learn more and to have thoughtful conversations, and in that kind of TED aspect of acknowledging that I don't know all of the things and that I want to learn together, I think is something that has allowed me to have some really amazing people that I've been able to interview for my podcast and to make just really amazing connections that have allowed my business to grow and I guess we'll just say thrive or something like that, but do well, right?
Thrive sounds good. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, very big appetite for risk. And then I would say the way our clients look at us is that big companies, big ships, very difficult to change the direction. But what our clients would do, they would give us the riskiest briefs, the most impossible things to do, which always had a big technology component that would have to be developed. So the risk of the tech either not being developed, not working, failing miserably, it's always here, it's always present, you get to live with it. And I think over the years you just develop a appetite and a level of tolerance for that risk. Because the more you deal with tech, I think to a certain extent, the more you are exposed to that last mile technology risk. We just heard in the earlier talk, the moment when the videos are transferred from where they're made to, a lot of things can happen. I felt that. I really, just kind of a few studies went through my mind immediately. But you learn how to kind of live with it, and I think our clients always appreciated the fact that we could tolerate that risk, but also always had the kind of, I would say, business attitude of just being cautious of the time and money component, because although research is beautiful, it needs to fit a certain business objective, and that's the kind of fortunate or unfortunate reality of things.
Okay, so I'm going to put you all on the spot. What failure have you had that you learned the most from? That you're glad you had that failure?
There's too many to choose from. I think the biggest one for me, because it was the reason why I came into market research, was I applied to do my PhD and I got in, but I didn't get the funding. So I got told, you can come, but you would need to self-fund. And I just wasn't in a position to do that. And that was kind of always my dream. I thought, go do PhD, become a doctor, and then off I go, set for life kind of thing. And that was kind of it was actually a blessing in disguise when I look back, because I then found a job in the insights industry, and the rest is history. So that failure kind of set me off on a career of where I'm supposed to be.
And I did notice that failure took you from intern to innovation manager to senior innovation to you've made a lot of steps in a short amount of time. So congratulations. All right.
Yeah, so I think for me, the failure, so I was thinking also of the, I too have a really hard time saying no to things. But I would say along that line is I stayed in my corporate role for too long, and it took too long before I went off on my own. So that's where I would say is a failure of myself of not being willing to take that risk and staying safe for longer than I potentially should have in a role that wasn't really going to be going anywhere.
Has that changed your mindset about making those decisions today? Looking back on that and saying I waited too long?
Yeah, I think so. It helps where I have that kind of gut instinct where you say, I don't know that this is the right project to take on. Something feels off when if there's a potential client or whatever it is, but you want to force it and make it work and rationalize why it could be good. Those sorts of things. And I've, like I said, had several of relearning that lesson, but try to be at least a little bit better and more aware of that and take on things that are just the right fit for the company.
And what about you? What kind of failures have you had that really
Yes,
run?
there's one particular study in Southeast Asia which was overly ambitious in terms of the amount of data that we collected. And certain data packages were compromised, and it was a really stressful situation because I think it was our third or our fourth project that we ever did. So it was very stressful. Communicating that to the client, to all of the stakeholders, it was just a lot. But the learning that we got out of it is just we then implemented a new data processing pipeline. We have some offline modes of working. So you really kind of make your system more robust. You think about all the different ways things can go wrong. But I think when you're young and you come very ambitious to the research world, you don't think in terms of, what are all of the things that can go wrong, especially in some markets where, maybe the technology or the internet connectivity isn't where you would want it to be. So that's a piece of failure, yeah.
Yeah, we all go through it. So we talk about the future of insights quite often here, and it is Insight Innovation Exchange, right? So if you're thinking out 2 or 3 or 4 years for yourself and for our industry, what do you think? Where do you think we're going to see ourselves in just a few years down the road? A few years backwards, we were talking about, mobile, now check mark on that one, right? So where is it going for yourselves and for the industry?
Well, I guess because I was sort of talking about that in one of the other answers, but because I think my background, like I said, is in behavioral science and behavioral economics. I think that is where the future is going when we look at insights, and you have that represented with several of people that have been on stages here and in Austin and everywhere else, I'm sure, with Green Book. But really, the behavioral piece and understanding the brain and how that ties in not just with the consumer behavior, but with the way that we shape the study, the way that we think about the questions that we're asking, the way that we work within our own teams, the way that other agencies can be pitching their ideas for projects and people within teams being able to pitch project ideas. Really all of that way that we communicate and bringing the brain into perspective, I think, is the future of all business, insights included.
I think to lead on that, so I have a bit of a background in neuroscience as well, and something that I got involved in when I first started at Blue Order was this kind of our neuroscience toolkit. And the biggest challenge was, what does it mean? Well, what does it mean? This doesn't tell me anything. I don't care if that wave is bigger than that wave. And that was really difficult, and I think a big part of the future is education, and understanding what really matters. And I talked about it a bit in my talk, so not to labour the point, but if something in the real world works via a certain process of way of doing something, so the reason why you pick product A over product B is because of these heuristics or biases in your brain, then you have to test in that way. You can't test in a different way because the decision isn't made in that way. So I think it's just being very, very similar to what you're saying, just being really aware of how people come to set decisions and testing in that same way, so we understand it in the real world, how it actually transcends in real life.
The closer to being in context.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely. More valid.
which is the reason that, we're getting further and further away from the 30-minute surveys about, washing your hands 6 weeks ago. So,
I would actually echo everything that was just said. I think we won't be asking any questions. So I think the act of asking a question, how do you form it? It creates so much priming effects, and how do you form the answers? We'll just observe and listen more, and we've seen this in terms of behavioral analytics. It's already here, but just in general, observing and listening more, asking less. I think we see it as a major shift in our clients' mindset, and I think it's just something that will expand more. I think 10 years from today, we'll be looking at surveys as a very archaic, very prime way of trying to grasp someone's sentiment. So I think surveys are a thing of past, and asking the question in general just won't be around.
if we got leadership like this coming in to take over and push us, we're in good hands. So, someone stepping into the industry today, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give them to be able to sit on the stage and talk about their experiences in a few years?
Okay, so I would say definitely education. I think every year, at conferences like these, IIEX last year, the year before that, everything changes. There are certain themes that evolve and that kind of get more sophisticated over time, but when I look at our old reports 7 years ago, they're so archaic. They seem like they're from the Stone Age. So much has changed. So I think investing a lot in education, equally in the technology component, but also in the everything, let's call it kind of human aspect, however you want to interpret it, whether it's neuroscience, behavioral, whether it's just studying anthropology, whatever fits your interest best. But just continuing to kind of educate yourself, both among researchers but also among practitioners. So there's like this fine balance where you don't want to get tilted too much in one or the other direction.
Okay. And what about you, Hannah? What advice would you give?
I think the main advice is to stay curious and kind of always be open. You start a career and you learn from someone or a team of people, one company in one way, but don't be afraid to take in other opinions and kind of be a sponge. So absorb yourself in different departments, different conferences. So always learning and kind of, like say, educating and just remaining open to what else is out there. And a big part of that is being really transparent. I think that's something that, like you touched on. If you don't know something, just say. It's difficult sometimes to step out your comfort zone and be like, I don't know that. Even us as more senior people in the field, you've still got to say, I don't know. Let me learn. Show me how. Tell me how. So I think that's two bits of advice.
One of the biggest improvements in my career was when I say, instead of pretending like I did now.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, anyway.
I would build on what my friend Priscilla McKinney was saying in her session earlier today. It is all about having good connections with people and being a genuinely kind person that is putting other people first. So I do a lot of sharing what other people are working on and not asking for other things to come back from it, just to say, look at this cool thing someone is doing, look at this amazing thing Hannah's doing today, how great is that? And I think if you're actively sharing and connecting with other people, it always comes back in a positive way. And then on the off chance, the one time you do ask for somebody, it's amazing how the floodgates open of people wanting to help you when you do need something. So just networking, but with the intent of helping others first versus, like she said, not pitch slapping people, which is my new favorite saying in the whole world. So Priscilla, trademark it.
So I want to congratulate the three of you, and you guys did rise to the top of a wonderful field of competitors, and it's easy to understand why. And thank you for taking the time to do this. So can we get a round of applause? That's it. We've got we've got break time, and I forgot an announcement a little while ago. We've got people doing portraits, we've got photography, we've got luggage tags, we've got all kinds of cool stuff and the other things. So go do that. Sorry, it was a little late, but anyway, thank you very much. Sure. Can you talk loud?
Yeah. If you had a wish for one in research industry, what would you like to change?
I would say for me, there's too big of a gap between application and academia. And so I would wish that there could be more synergy between those two places, and because there's a pretty big gap right now.
More people-focused methodologies. So just understanding how people live their lives and getting into them and testing them there and then without any biases.
I would say kind of quality over quantity. I think we see a bunch of bad data just floating around and people being impressed by just the amount of data. It's such an archaic concept, oftentimes the best insights come from very small but data-rich sample sizes, but just the fascination with big data sets just never seems to go away. So yeah, I would change that.
Great. Yes?
So I guess this is quite focused on my company, but we do a lot of like lunch and learn talks and just really sharing the knowledge, and obviously also doing that externally as well here, and trying to just spread the word and get out there and all the networking and everything. But yeah, so we like to try and make sure like what one person or one department learns is shared across the company as well, and that can inspire other and create conversations that might not have happened before, because you don't hear about what others going on as well.
So I would really recommend, there's a great book that just came out earlier this year by Zoe Chance. It's called Influence is Your Superpower. She's a professor at Yale, and she talks about how we should all be asking more questions, and people are more likely to say yes to you than you think that they are if you're just willing to overcome and ask the question and be a little bit uncomfortable. And so being the person that introduces yourself to somebody and asks what they're doing, and then taking that extra step to say, well, how might we do something more together? So being willing to feel a little bit vulnerable and asking questions and being proactive is my best advice.
I would say finding a good mentor very early on. I was lucky one of my first angel investors is still a good friend and mentor. He taught me some of the biggest lessons in personal finance, just in managing, oftentimes you're very overwhelmed with just the world when you're entering in a field like this. But having someone who's kind of been there, done that, not impressed by anything, ground you and just tell you, it's normal, we'll just pass by, we'll laugh at this in a few years. Just having that right person, and ideally, having skin in the game, so either investing in your company or something similar to that, just worked very well for me.
So I love the Q&A at the end. No, I wasn't expecting it, but this is fantastic. Do you guys have another minute or two?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, all three once again.